So if all you needed was calories, simplest thing to do would be get a big 55-gallon drum of oil delivered once in a while and just take a scoop of that out every day, and you'd get your 2,000 calories and you wouldn't have to muss or fuss with anything else. Would that work? No. It turns out there's more than just calories you need in order to survive. You also need a source of water. We're mostly water. Dehydration itself is actually one of the most vulnerable conditions that people get into, and it's the reason why most people that die and are saved by medical care are saved. It's not drugs and antibiotics that's the big kahuna there. It's actually water and including IV fluids. In fact, the first thing that most people undergo when they go into an emergency medical care situation is somebody will drop a line on them, they'll put a drip fluids into them in order to maintain hydration and electrolytes and whatnot until the body can actually overcome whatever it is that it's dealing with, whether it's an infection or blood loss, etc. So hydration becomes one of our most critical issues. That means you either need to drink water or you need to eat foods that are higher in water content so that you can maintain your most abundant ingredient in balance. You also need protein. So proteins are made up of 20 amino acids. Now, 12 of those amino acids you can actually make from carbohydrate. But 8 of those amino acids as an adult, 10 possibly as a child, are called essential amino acids. They're called essential amino acids because they're essential that you get them in the diet pre-formed. Your body can't manufacture them like it can the other 12 amino acids. So you have to get enough protein. And, for the typical male, that's around 60 grams of protein a day, including appropriate balances of these essential amino acids. Too little protein can lead to deprivation, and too much protein can also be a major problem. Excess protein, in fact, may be one of the major risk factors that contribute to conditions like kidney disease, as well as cardiovascular disease. Some people believe that excess protein, animal protein, may be more responsible even than excess animal fat when it comes to many of these pathological processes. You also do need fat in your diet. You don't need oil, including olive oil, but you do need fat. So whole fats are found in all plant foods. Some plants are particularly abundant, like avocados, nuts, and seeds, but everything from watermelon to lettuce has fats. And again, too little can be a problem. Too much can be a major problem, as you see all around you. You also need vitamins. Vitamins are chemicals that catalyze chemical reactions. For example, vitamin C. If you don't get vitamin C, you would develop a problem called scurvy, which is a particularly debilitating problem. It used to be common amongst sailors because they would go out to the ocean for 6 months eating dried meat and dried bread and no fruits and vegetables, and they would develop scurvy. And then some clever people figured out that if they took limes on the ship, they didn't know what was in the lime, but if they would suck on the limes once in a while, they wouldn't get scurvy. And it turned out that something was vitamin C. It's interesting because they used to call these guys limeys because they would carry the limes on the ocean voyages in order to avoid scurvy. So vitamins are substances that generally were plentiful in the environment, are not produced by the body. Now, vitamin C, that was an interesting situation because it turns out they used to study vitamin C on rats and rodents, but rats make their own vitamin C. They don't actually need to get vitamin C from the outside. And so obviously the research was seriously flawed. It's humans, Indian fruit-eating bats, dachshunds, very few animals don't make their own vitamin C, but we're one of them. So we have to have some vitamin C in the environment. It turns out all the vitamin C we need comes from whole plant foods. There is one vitamin that humans don't get enough of in the modern world if they're on a vegan diet, an unsupplemented vegan diet, and that's vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 forms only from bacteria. So if you're a meat eater, you don't have as much to worry about because not only is there B12 inherent in meat, but also all that nice fecal material that contaminates meat would be another source of vitamin B12. But on a vegan diet where you're washing and peeling to avoid exposure to things like worms and parasites and other things, using good hygienic measures, you're not going to get much bacterial contamination. So over enough years or decades, you can deplete vitamin B12 and develop symptoms like macrocytic anemia, neurological problems can be very serious. So B12, we recommend 1,000 micrograms of methylcobalamin a day as a routine for all people that are on exclusively plant-based diets. There are other vitamins like vitamin D, for example, that you form from the sun exposure. But nowadays in the modern world where people live far from the equator, or they live behind plate glass windows and don't get sun exposure, they can develop D deficiency. In fact, D deficiency is common. It's more common in people with high melanin counts, like Black folks, be more vulnerable to D deficiency. People that live in the far north or don't get outside, and people that are deficient in vitamin D develop things like osteoporosis, increased risk for breast and other cancers, chronic pain. And so having normal vitamin D levels is important, easy enough to test. You can test for 25-dehydroxyvitamin D. Those levels should be in a healthy range. If not, more sun exposure or, if necessary, supplementation may be recommended. So minerals are structural components: calcium, magnesium, phosphorus. There's also heavy metals like lead and mercury and things you want to try to avoid. So you want to get the stuff you need, but avoid the stuff you don't. We need fiber. Fiber is interesting. They used to think if it didn't matter much. It was just kind of the non or less digestible part of the food. Turns out now we know that fiber in food is very important. Couple ways. One is it forms the bulk of the stool, that and bacteria. And so if you don't have enough fiber in the diet, your stools will be very hard and small, and you often will strain in order to pass those stools. And that's responsible for hemorrhoids and fissures, diverticulitis, uterine prolapses, varicose veins, conditions that used to be relatively rare but are now ubiquitous, because what's happening is people are eating diets with dramatically lower fiber content than they would have been if they're eating a whole plant food diet. So we have a multi-billion-dollar industry treating chronic constipation, diarrhea, and other problems that come about because of a lack of adequate plant food in the diet. The other thing is that these fibers, these soluble fibers, form the food of organisms that live in your gut. You have over 5 pounds of creatures living just in your intestinal tract, just in your digestive system. Over 5 pounds, over 1 trillion creatures. And in a healthy plant-based gut, there's going to be over 1,000 strain of these organisms working together to keep you protected from many of the evil forces in life. People, for example, that are on meat-dominated diets have completely different microbiome than people that are on a healthier plant-based diet. And as a consequence, they're going to be more vulnerable to formation of chemicals. TMA, for example, which becomes trimethylamine oxidase in the body, a highly toxic substance, dramatically higher in meat eaters than in plant-based people. Plant eaters have much higher levels of things like vitamin K, which forms as a byproduct of bacterial production. So if you want to have nutrients and vitamins formed rather than toxic waste and sludge, then you want to try to focus on a whole plant food diet rather than a diet based on meat, fish, fowl, eggs, and dairy products. Having enough fiber, important issue. Phytochemicals. There are literally hundreds, probably thousands of phytochemicals that are thought to be protective. These are formed in plants only. So there's no phytochemicals in meat, fish, fowl, eggs, and dairy products, or fiber for that matter. Do you know there's no fiber in any animal products because it takes a plant cell to produce fiber? Animal cells don't have those components. That's true whether it's regular meat or organic meat. Doesn't matter. No meat, fish, fowl, eggs, or dairy products contain fiber or phytochemicals. That's only plants. Now, these phytochemicals are thought to be protective, protect us from cancer, protect us from problems. For example, resveratrol is one that was recognized because you find traces amount of it in red wine. And they actually tried to use that as some kind of promotional excuse to argue that red wine was healthy for you. Well, the fact is the healthy resveratrol, the powerful antioxidant, comes from the skin of grapes. And it just so happens that when you make wine, you haven't completely destroyed all the resveratrol. That doesn't mean that because there's a trace amount of antioxidant, that makes the substance healthy. And in fact, nothing could be farther from the truth. Alcohol, with its 7 calories per gram, is one of the more concentrated fat-inducing problems that people get exposed to. That's why men get those really attractive beer bellies that women like so much. Oh, and the plumber's crack. Yeah, that's really a popular. In fact, I understand now they have to make the jeans right up even higher to cover that plumber's crack because the women were just going crazy. So phytochemicals from plants, good. Trace phytochemicals remaining in highly processed foods would not justify their existence.